أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear viewers, Salamun Alaikum Jamiyan wa Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuh. I, Sadiq Kamani, welcome you all to my show Youth Responsibility. So, on the last episode, I'm sure you've seen, we were discussing about technological aspect, we were discussing about time utilization, but today we will talk about social responsibilities. Do we really have social responsibilities to perform in life? Do you feel it should be prioritized over other responsibilities? Do you feel we at least need to pay some heed on social responsibilities and then obviously you have to perform other responsibilities? Let us learn from the religious jurisprudent, and Alhamdulillah, I'm honored and privileged to welcome Sayyid Muhammad Mahdi Modarresi. Sayyid, Salamun Alaikum wa Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuh.
Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Sadiq. Inshallah you're well.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, and I hope you're doing well as well. And I would like to thank you for the time that you've given us, because we can at least discuss and learn from the best, right? So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. May Allah bless you.
So Sayyid, I'm sure, we tend to focus on lot other responsibilities, perhaps moral responsibilities, perhaps social responsibilities, perhaps responsibilities towards our parents, responsibility towards our own, body and health and all that, right? But today I would just like to focus on social responsibilities. Like we say in corporate or in multinational organizations, we tend to focus on CSR activities, that is corporate social responsibilities, where your philanthropical aspect comes into picture, where perhaps planting a tree, educate the underprivileged people and all that stuff. Do you feel Islam has taught us something about social responsibilities, or has guided anything of that sort?
Absolutely. I mean, the religion of Islam is essentially a religion that advocates the importance of community, and therefore the connections that bond various members of the community, as much as it calls for personal development and the spiritual progress that a person has to make on a personal level. If you think about it, many of our religious rites and rituals are communal in nature. From congregational prayers to the rituals of Hajj, all the way down to teachings about how, for instance, the Quran instructs Prophet Musa and says to him to tell the Israelites that they should buy houses that face each other, right? In other words, don't live in disparate portions of the city. Try and live in areas where you are close together.
Like, don't be isolated.
Don't be isolated, right? Ensure that communities grow around each other and very close to one another. And so there's no question that our religion is extremely focused on the idea of building a strong and thriving community. And to do that, obviously, entails a great deal of responsibility, because you have to somehow manage the relationships of the individual units that comprise the family and then the larger community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even refers to Muslims by calling them ummah, ummatukum ummatun wahid, right? It's a nation, not just a community or a family or an individual. There's a nation, and to build a nation requires people to carry their own weight and their burden and their responsibilities so that everything works harmoniously. And so you mentioned, for instance, with corporate responsibility, that companies are trying to encourage their employees to do their bit to help the environment, to help the poor, disenfranchised, and so forth. I think Islam goes way beyond. Islam makes it a personal responsibility and obligation to look after the people around you, and to ensure that the people, as well as the environment, as well as every part of this ecosystem is looked after. And if you look at, for instance, the Bill of Rights by Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, what we refer to as Risalatul Huquq, you will see the Imam laying out 50 rights for almost everything around us. Everything that forms our lives has a right which means that we have a responsibility vis-a-vis that right. And it needs to be discharged in a manner that is satisfactory. Otherwise, there's going to be imbalance. Otherwise, the whole ecosystem either falls apart completely or we suffer as a result. And so the answer to your question is, without a doubt, we do have a responsibility.
Do you want to highlight the verses of Quran Kareem? If Quran is just, emphasized upon the social responsibilities, perhaps philanthropical responsibilities or stuff like that. I mean, do you want to just highlight few of the verses? I remember there's one verse, Surah Baqarah, verse number 177, if I'm not wrong. Do you just want to highlight?
I mean, look, the Quran speaks in broad terms as well as addressing specific responsibilities. The broad terms include things like ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you should cooperate, you should synergize and work together for the purpose of good and birr meaning charity, good acts, good deeds, wa taqwa, piety. Now, birr could include things like philanthropy and looking after members of the community who are poor and less fortunate. And taqwa could comprise things like enjoining the good and forbidding evil. Once again, the mere fact that one of the branches of religion, one of the obligations that every Muslim has, is to enjoin the good and forbid evil, tells you that this is a very tightly integrated system and not individual units working independently, right? If you think about it, Muslims are required to encourage each other to do good things and to discourage each other from engaging in sinful behavior. And there's a beautiful tradition where the Holy Prophet provides an illustration on why enjoining the good and forbidding evil are so important for the health and well-being of the community, in which he says, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, imagine you're on a boat, on a big ship, right? And you have rooms where people are staying, perhaps, again, these are details that I'm adding, but just to illustrate, imagine that I've rented one of these rooms in a cruise ship. And so I've paid in order to use the facilities on this ship, but I also have my own quarters, I have my room. Imagine if someone said, I want to drill a hole in my room that I've paid for, right? People will say, well, you have no right to do this. Even though it's my room, I've paid for it, but you're drilling a hole in a ship that has many other people being carried in it. And so I'm putting the lives of other people at risk. I'm endangering the health and well-being of others, not just myself. And so as an individual living in a community, for me to choose not to wear a mask, for instance, in the middle of a pandemic, or for me to choose to avoid getting vaccinated at a time when people are dying of this plague, for instance, I can't do that. I have to take other people into account. And so once again, Islam's insistence that you should, number one, look after those people who are poorer than you, who are less fortunate than you, and also look after them spiritually, just goes to prove that this is a religion that's heavily focused on community.
Thank you so much for that. I think this answers into a lot of details. But on the other side, right, if as a youth, as a young individual, I'm here to perform social responsibilities, but I am also dependent on the society if they would allow me to perform my responsibilities. Do you feel society plays a pivotal role in this for any youth to perform or to engage socially?
How would you define society?
Society in terms where, if I'm going to a group of people, right, where there would be like a lot of people who must be at the age of 40 or 45, and there would be like senior citizens, perhaps elders, who would straight away, at times they would decline that you're not allowed here, only people above the age of 40 can come here, or perhaps you are too young to come here, go learn from your school and all that stuff. So do you think it plays a pivotal role? Because to some extent I feel that it also discourages the young individuals, and then the youth will keep some sort of reservations.
Okay, so there are times when society hinders the youth's ability to discharge their responsibilities. And I think a good example of that is what happened with Prophet Ibrahim, ala nabiyyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. I mean, he was a youth who is trying to change society and trying to highlight the fact that they're worshiping idols that provide no benefit whatsoever, nor can they bring you any harm, as he often said. And yet, society was extremely antagonistic and resistant towards any kind of change. So you have this youth who's barely 12 or 13 years old, who in fact is forced by his uncle to help him sell the idols, right? Because Ibrahim's uncle was an actual idol seller, right? He used to sculpt these statues and he would sell them. And so traditions tell us that he would tell his nephew Ibrahim that you need to help me. And so he was basically a delivery service for the idols. And so some traditions say that Ibrahim used to throw the idols on the ground, put a rope around where the feet would be, and he would drag them in the mud and deliver them to the purchaser. And so while he was doing what his uncle was forcing him to do, he was making sure that the idols were not given their due respect. And so, expressing his position on the idol worship. My point is, yes, there's always going to be this tension. There's always going to be resistance on the part of the old guard, so to speak, who don't feel that the youth have the adequate skills or experience or knowledge. I say that we need a level of harmony. If what we're trying to change is something that is, as big as, belief in God and so forth, then you have to take some bold steps. But even in the example of Prophet Ibrahim, notice how he didn't get into a fight with his uncle. He spoke to him. He tried to reason with him. He was respectful and mindful. So I think we need to keep the social harmony in the community while trying to implement change in a gradual way. So the youth should also be very mindful that we don't want a generational conflict here. What we want is to introduce positive change, and to do that, we need to work with the elders. We need to respect the elders, right? These are people who built our institutions. They are the reason we are where we are today. At the end of the day, we don't want to antagonize them or make them feel unappreciated or disrespected. And so try and use more diplomatic and mellow ways to sway them and to help them understand, as opposed to engage in direct confrontation.
I think it's about the legacy that they've created, right? Now it's upon them as well, and as well as upon the young individual to communicate so that they can carry on the legacy.
Absolutely.
So do you feel that there are certain do's and don'ts which as a young individual needs to keep in mind before they engage socially? And if yes, what are those?
Absolutely. I think the youth are usually the more enthusiastic segments of the community. If they see a problem, they're usually inclined to affect positive change more than others, whereas people who are older tend to be perhaps a little slower when it comes to adopting change, or they might want to deliberate a little bit more and take measured steps, whereas the youth are usually there at the front lines doing whatever needs to be done. If you need a place cleaned up or fixed up or what have you, it's the youth that show up, because not only do they have the vitality and the energy, but also the enthusiasm that comes with being a youth. And so this makes it a wonderful and useful mixture as well, right? On the one hand, you have the wisdom that the old senior citizens in the community will bring. Wisdom, guidance, legacy, experience. But all of that would be completely useless if you didn't have the energy and vitality that the youth bring to the table. And so both of these two demographics need to appreciate the value that they're bringing to the table. So the do's and don'ts, I would say, be courteous, be respectful, be mindful, but also don't be discouraged if somebody says to you that you're not up to the task, that you're not built for this. I know people who have been discouraged from an early age because one day at some majlis or gathering or wedding, one of the elders said something that was hurtful. And so they completely changed the course of their lives and did something entirely different as opposed to helping the community and so forth. So don't be discouraged. Have a bit of a thick skin and follow the example of the youthful companions of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. Follow the example of, I don't know, I just thought of Qais ibn Musahhar al-Saydawi, for instance, who was one of the messengers of Imam al-Hussein. And he's the one that Imam al-Hussein sent to Kufa with a letter that was addressed to some of the key leaders of the community in Kufa. The traditions say that when he got to Kufa, Al-Husayn ibn Numayr, not Hussein, but Husayn ibn Numayr, was the head of Ibn Ziyad's security apparatus. He was a vicious, vile man. And so they told him that there is a person coming. He said that must be a messenger from Hussein, because all communication had been blocked off. Entry and exit from the city was prevented. So what was this man doing? And so he said, catch him. So they went after him. He tried to escape. He couldn't. They caught him and brought him to Husayn ibn Numayr. He said to him, before he arrived, he took that letter, tore it up, and swallowed it as a security measure, knowing that he's going to be captured. So he swallowed the fragments of the paper or skin the letter was written on. Al-Husayn ibn Numayr said to him, what was that letter? He said, the reason I just tore it and ate it was so you wouldn't see the contents. You think I'm just going to volunteer and tell you what was in the letter? He said, well, where have you come from? He said, I've come from my master, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. I'm not going to hide this. It's not something that I can conceal. So they took him to Ibn Ziyad, and he had this confrontation with Ibn Ziyad, which was so incredibly brave. Ibn Ziyad at some point said to him, get up on the pulpit. Unless you say what I tell you to say, I will kill you. Go on the pulpit and tell people that your master is a rebel, that he is a delinquent, that he decided to rise against the legitimate Khalifa Yazid ibn Muawiyah, or I will kill you. So Qais ibn Musahhar said, fine, I'll do it. He got up on the pulpit. He said, Ayyuhan nas, I have been sent by Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the Imam of our time, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and his location is such and such, and he expects you all to go and help him and support him in his cause. So he was pulled from the minbar and was killed right then and there. These are the youth that should inspire us. These are the companions of the Ahlul Bayt that should pave the way for us to really face any challenge and any problem that we have in our lives and to do some great things, inshallah.
Do you think at one point of time this social responsibilities, becomes obligatory or becomes wajib? Like one example that you cited. The another example would be Wahab Kalbi. Do you think these responsibilities becomes wajib at one point of time?
Wahab al-Kalbi in what aspect of his life?
Wahab Kalbi as a Christian still supported Imam Hussein and fought for him, right?
So one thing to clarify is that Wahab al-Kalbi was a Christian, but he converted to Islam at the hands of Imam al-Hussein. I think that's sometimes a distinction that people don't make. They think that he stayed a Christian and he defended the Imam. No. When he saw Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, I said this at a conference once in the presence of a Christian priest. I said, there is a connection between Christians and Imam al-Hussein that is extraordinary. There's something about Imam al-Hussein that attracts Christians towards him. And we see this in Imam Hussein's own life, but we also see it today. And I said to him that I believe the reason is that when they look at Imam al-Hussein or read about him or learn about him, they see a reflection of Jesus in Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. There is an uncanny resemblance between the two that attracts them. But going back to your question, social responsibilities, the rules that apply to them are the same rules that apply to acts of worship. So you have things that are recommended, and you have things that are obligatory, and you also have things that are haram, right? And of course you have things that are neutral. When it comes to our social responsibilities, whether it is towards people who are less fortunate, the poor, the hungry, we absolutely have a massive responsibility towards them. And if it's not wajib, because the person happens to be related to me or close to me or a brother in the community, then at the very least it's mustahab, because it happens to be people who are perhaps a little farther from me, but I hear of their plight and I learn that they're suffering, and I can help them either by paying from my own funds or cooking myself or soliciting donations from other people. At the very least, if we don't have money in our hands, then we have our hands that we could extend towards other people and say, let's help this cause. They say that one of the maraja on this point, I think this might be an interesting story to tell, one of the most senior maraja was once at the shrine of, I believe, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and his students suddenly noticed the marja after he finished his prayers. He took his aba'a off and he threw it on the ground and started saying, Ayyuhan nas, there are some poor people, we're trying to raise money for them so that we could help them. And if you have any money, come and pour it in my aba'a. So imagine like a senior marja standing there in public asking for donations. So his students ran to him and they said to him, Maulana, Sayyidina, what are you doing? This is not befitting your status. And he said, look, I feel that I might have done things in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What He accepts or doesn't accept, I have no clue. But the one thing I've never done for Allah is humiliate myself for Him.
Allahu Akbar.
I want to be humiliated for the sake of Allah. So if we can help people directly, we absolutely should. If we can't, then do so indirectly. Call people, ask for donations, and try and get together as a community to help those in need. So yes, it can be wajib to do this if I have the means to help those who are in need. But then you've got other social responsibilities, and again, this is a very broad subject. Things like connecting with family members, things like salatul arham, and again, that is absolutely wajib. As a matter of fact, we have a hadith that says that while there may be exceptions to certain things in Islam, for instance, if you don't have money, you don't have to perform hajj if you're not mustati'.
True.
If you are in a coma, then salat doesn't apply to you. If you're traveling, your salat gets cut short. All these exceptions occur. But there are things which have no exceptions and no exemptions are made. One of them is salatul arham. And so if I have a family member, someone related to me by blood, and I've severed ties with them, I don't have any legitimate excuse on the Day of Judgment. Unless my religion was at stake, unless connecting with them would jeopardize my faith. And even then, scholars say, you should maintain the bare minimum of salatul rahim by saying salam once a year, for instance. So yeah, there are times, many times, where social responsibilities are wajib, which is why you need to be well versed. You need to learn about the rules of your religion so that you don't falter.
Thank you so much, Sayyidina. I think my last question to you will be, what would be your advices for the youth and young individuals of perhaps India and across the globe that you've been so far, right? What would be your humble advice?
Think big. Don't think at an individual or local level. You see, we now have opportunities available to us that were not available to people 50 years ago or even 10 years ago. We have tools available to us that we can utilize for the improvement and betterment of our lives, but also the dissemination of our faith. Amir al-Mu'mineen famously declares, قِيمَةُ كُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا يُحْسِنُهُ. The value of every person is what he knows. There's another hadith where the Imam says, عَلَى قَدَرِ هِمَّتِهِ. Your ambitions set your value. How large are your ambitions? If you only think about your daily routine and your problems on a personal level, then that's going to be your value. But if you start thinking on a global scale, if you start thinking about implementing change on a level that affects everyone, not just those around you, then those around you will definitely benefit, you will benefit, but so will other people. Of course, if you're going to prioritize, you have to start with yourself. You have to develop yourself spiritually. and intellectually. But then once you've done that, or in the process, you can really make big differences around the world. So that's number one. In fact, the Imam himself has a beautiful narration that I'll paraphrase, in which he says, مَا رَامَ امْرِئٌ أَمْرًا إِلَّا نَالَهُ أَوْ مَا دُونَهُ. When you set out to achieve something, you will always reach that goal. If you've made an objective, if you've set a goal for yourself, you will always reach it. If you don't reach it, then you will reach just below it.
Just like Salman al-Muhammadi wanted to become Maula Ali, but end up becoming Salman al-Muhammadi.
Ahsan. Or Prophet Musa, there's a beautiful hadith as well, in which the Imam says, كُنْ لِمَا لَا تَرْجُو أَرْجَى مِمَّا تَرْجُو. Have hope in the most unexpected things. Because when Musa went to get fire for his family, عَادَ بِالنُّبُوَّةِ, he came back with prophethood. So have lofty aspirations, big ambitions, think outside the box, and move in a manner that is focused on the service to the Imam of the time. Always ask yourself, what would the Imam of the time want from me? What are his priorities that I need to follow? And whether every action that you take is pleasing to the Imam or not. And I think with that moral compass and that drive and determination, we can achieve big things, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Sayyid Muhammad Mahdi. I think indeed it was a pleasure to be with you, to learn something great, and I'm sure my audience would have enjoyed it as well.
Pleasure so much.
Thank you so much, and please keep us in your prayers. Dear viewers, I'm sure you enjoy these episodes, these 2 episodes, and I'm sure you've learned something good. So please continue to spread the message of humanity, continue to spread the message of Hussainiyah, continue to spread the message of Imam al-Zamana, and please, if you like these episodes, these are our YouTube channels and these are our social media accounts. Continue to like, share and subscribe. Forward these episodes and help, for a good cause. This is Sadiq Kamani signing off, inshallah. See you soon. And next time when we meet, we'll have something more interesting. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.